Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Real Science Exchange, the pubcast where leading scientists and industry professionals meet over a few drinks to discuss the latest ideas and trends in animal nutrition. We've got a very interesting one here today as we continue our companion animal podcast series. The title of the presentation that we're going to be examining is Exploring Fresh African Game Meat in Pet Food for Novel, Sustainable Approach to Nutrition. So that's going to be quite interesting. We're going to be talking about that with Angelique Myburgh from South Africa. Welcome, Angelique.
Thank you.
Looking forward to this one. If you wouldn't mind, would you just kind of start us off by telling us who Angelique is? What do we need to know about you? I also want to know about your pets, right? We're all pet owners here, so tell me a little bit about your favorite pet.
Okay, cool. But let me start with my background because that will fall, like my pets will come in with that. So I'm an animal scientist. I studied meat science as my master's, where I did research on plain zebra meat.
And this was in South Africa?
This was in South Africa at the University of Stellenbosch. So we had a whole meat program there, especially on game meat, because we've got all these animals and there isn't baseline data on it. So what I did during that entire master's was just like looking at the chemical and physical characteristics of the meat. We aged some of the zebra meat till about 40 days. We looked at the sensory profile and the fatty acids. So during my master's, procrastination eats, like always, I accidentally adopted a dog. Her name is Bessie. Bessie, which means berry in Afrikaans, which is my native language. And actually with this dog, she was about 3 months old. She started itching and scratching. And I was like, what's wrong with this poor puppy? And then I started researching pet food at the end of the day. So learning about diets, understanding what is the role of proteins and novel proteins, obviously with doing my master's. And that really sparked my interest in the pet food industry. So Bessie is now obviously grown. We fed her game meat, the treats that we've launched recently. And I've also adopted another dog called Funky. So Funky means finch. She's a very loud dog. She barks and for everything. And she loves swimming. So yeah, that's Bessie and Funky. And then I've got a black cat called Oats. My husband loves beer, and he loves an oats stout. So it was like a black cat, let's call it Oats.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, great story.
Yeah.
I see you brought a guest with you, Gail Tavill, came with you today. Gail, tell us a bit about yourself. You're going to serve as a color commentator, by the way. Have you ever done that?
No, but I'll give it a shot.
All right, there you go.
Super. So thanks for having me. I am not really in the pet food industry other than we have a subsidiary that works for my company my company owns. I've spent my entire career, 30 plus years, in the human food industry. I grew up in R&D. I'm an engineer by training, and I kind of slid sideways into sustainability a couple of decades ago and have been continuing that journey in the human food space. And now that my company has acquired a pet food company, trying to extend our reach into a more circular food system holistically, because pet foods and farm animals are a big off-taker of some of the byproducts of human food production. So there's a huge sustainability impact associated with feeding animals. So I'm super excited to be at this forum. It's my first time here, and really looking forward to learning more about pet food.
Good. And thanks for joining us. My co-host for this session is going to be Dr. Eric Altom. Eric, it's been a while, but welcome back. You're no stranger to the pub.
Well, thank you for having me. A little bit about my background. I'm trained as an animal scientist. Elected to go into nutrition and was given the opportunity to do my work at Auburn University with dogs and olfaction and how diet and exercise impacts olfaction. Then joined the IMS company and have been in the pet food industry. And part of what we had done in the IMS company was looking at novel proteins. And so that was part of my role. So that is my personal professional interest in this specific topic. I'm currently director of innovation for Balchem and looking at new technologies in the meat science realm so that we can upcycle a lot of protein co-products. So I'm really interested in hearing this topic, hearing something about the supply chain, how these proteins have been utilized, how we can use them more, how we can talk about sustainability. So thank you very much for having me this evening.
No, thanks for coming, Eric. So, Angelique, why don't you just start off? You're going to be giving the presentation. Is that later today or tomorrow?
It's today.
It's
It's
today.
about 3 this
Okay,
afternoon.
it's going to be great practice for you here.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
All right. What are kind of give me an outline of the presentation and some of the key things you're going to be talking about today? Dr. Altom, Balchem's created this brand new product called Structuring and Forming Technologies. Tell me a little bit about that.
This is our PetSure branded technology that helps processors and manufacturers utilize and transform protein in such as organ meats and plant-based proteins into treats and finished products. It is suitable for a wide range of animal-based and plant-based proteins. What it does is helps increase the product durability through the process. It provides consistent texture and the quality while providing processing flexibility and avoiding some CapEx expenditures.
You know, there's been quite a bit of research at Auburn University, and one of the things I was intrigued by is that they were able to take liver, which basically liquefies when you grind it or whatever and process it, and you were able to take this technology and put it back together and create a sellable product. Can you tell me a little more about that?
Sure. So this is a combination of calcium lactate and sodium alginate. Now, as you know, we are experts, and one of our core competency is microencapsulation. So we're able to control this protein cross linkages by microencapsulating the calcium lactate, and then we're able to deliver the cross linkages at the specific time in the processing. What we have found is we can start using more of these traditionally hard to handle protein materials such as meat slurries, organ meats, plant-based proteins, even
Fish.
fish, insect proteins that really you kind of limited into the amount you can put into a product because you're not able to get a cohesive product at the end.
So, Eric, so it's a great technology. Tell me, have we had any success stories with it?
Sure. So recently, a customer was having issue with excessive breakage in some of their treats, and they wanted to look at this technology and investigate ways of decreasing the waste material or fines or broken pieces in their process and increase a more sellable product. So by leveraging this technology, they were able to decrease the waste, decrease fines, decrease breakage, but end up with a product that has a greater consumer appeal, which then leads to further consumer or customer loyalty and repeat purchases.
Yeah. Thanks, Eric.
So basically, I'm going to talk about Montego and the work that we do. We recently started using African antelope. So just a little bit of background on Montego. So we are in South Africa. We started in the year 2000, so we're about 25 years old, and we are actually in the Karoo area. So the Karoo area of South Africa was known to be a was famous for large herds of Springbok, and that gave farmers in the area the chance to diversify their livestock with goats and sheep and antelopes such as Springbok, and they could actually export this meat to the European Union. But then in 2011, basically the industry had a major setback because there was an export ban placed on the industry. So you can just imagine the impact that
And why
had.
was that done?
Because of foot and mouth disease. There
Got
was
it.
an outbreak of foot and mouth disease. So that meant that the farmers actually couldn't export this meat anymore, and that just had an impact on the population of the Springbok, and it also had an impact on the economy and the local communities surrounding those farms. So then in 2023, South Africa reacted to that and they actually published a game meat strategy. And the whole goal behind that strategy is to commercialize the use of game meat again. So what they did was they allocated a lot of avenues of how game meat can be used, but they didn't even include the the pet food industry. That was a massive oversight, and we are the perfect industry to use byproducts, to use trimmings, to use organs. So the industry did come up with some innovations where they tried to sous vide meat to export it to Europe. But who wants to buy a half-cooked steak at the end of the day? And the pet food industry is in the perfect situation to process dog food, process cat food in dry forms and in semi-moist, meeting the temperatures that's required to have a kill step. And now we can actually use the trimmings and offal and export it. So that the whole reason for the presentation is actually to tell everyone that Africa can contribute to the evolving protein landscape that we're currently in.
So just kind of to clarify, so all of these, the African game meats, these are all farmed animals. They're not wild?
They are wild. They're
They
wild
are.
on farms, but they're extensively farmed.
Got it.
So they're not fed any vegetation, any supplemental feeding. The only time they will be fed vegetation or food is when it's in really severe conditions, when it's very dry. But otherwise, they're free roaming. They don't get any additives, and they just feed on the natural vegetation.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Very well. And in how many species would that encompass?
Oh, that's quite a lot. So you've got
That,
obviously
that are farmed and marketed, or not? Farmed is the wrong
So
word, but
for meat consumption, we've got a whole array of antelope. And antelope includes Springbok, which we use at the moment and advocate for. But it also includes kudu, oryx, wildebeest. And it includes other animals as well, such as zebra, buffalo, warthog, giraffe. So there's a whole array of game species. The big difference is that you get game species and you get game meat and you get venison meat. And sometimes there's kind of a confusion between the two. And still in South Africa, they use that term interchangeably. So sometimes you will go to a restaurant and they would say venison meat, but actually it's game meat. So the difference is venison refers to deer, which is known for in the US and also in New Zealand. But they're farmed more intensively in New Zealand, where in South Africa, game is farmed extensively. So that's also the major difference between game and venison.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then the primary purpose for these is for human consumption first, and then you've got the byproducts.
Yeah, exactly. So
all
the
right.
secondary products can go to pet food, yeah,
All right.
and be utilized.
Yeah, very well.
Can I ask a question?
I'll-
I'm
So
curious.
one thing I did, Gail, I forgot to mention, I will take over sometimes, and
Okay.
you've got to elbow your
gonna
way
jump in.
So get in there, push me out of there.
I'm just curious. My company does a lot of primary processing in Europe. So we have abattoirs across Europe, and it's very high tech and it's very much of it's automated. I'm just curious, how do you process this diversity of game animals in
Great
an
question.
efficient way? How does that work?
So there is a lot of associations in South Africa, and with these associations, we are also part of it, but also our professional hunters are part of it. So being part of those associations, you commit to ethically harvesting these animals. So what will typically will happen, a farmer will have a population of Springbok, which they will need to control. So they will get professional hunters on their farm with a vet on site. And obviously the harvesting will happen. They will eviscerate the animals on the farm. And that's where the sad part comes in. They leave some of those organs in the field because there isn't a mobile abattoir that is certified to take in those liver or kidney or hearts, which have a great nutritional value. But at the end of the day, so that's left in the field or it's given to the local community. But then the carcasses are loaded onto a cooling truck and that is transported to an abattoir where it gets deboned and processed.
Is there any opportunity to capture all of that byproduct so it doesn't get left for scavenging?
Yeah, so there is some companies that are trying to build mobile abattoirs, but the biggest limitation is obviously to certify it, to make sure that there's certification in place for meat safety. But yeah, that is a value chain that we can work on, and I think there is plans to actively work on it.
What does certification look like in South Africa? I know we use veterinarians here in the United States. They're inspectors. Is it similar there in South Africa?
Yeah, so we've got the Department of Agriculture in South Africa, and then we've got a Meat Safety Act. So game meat does fall under the Meat Safety Act, meaning that we can harvest it and use commercially. So other certifications, for instance, at the abattoir, will be if being FFSC certified. It will be having a ZA certificate. So ZA certificate is a governmental certificate. Even with our pet food companies, you need to have a ZA certificate to be registered as a manufacturing site. That means that you get audited against their rules and regulations to ensure that you comply. And that's the same with abattoirs, but then also they get EU certification. So it depends on what their goal is and what they get audited on, but you will need to have an EU and an FDA certification in South Africa in order to export. So we at our treats manufacturing facility, we are EU, UK, and FDA approved.
So is the EU your primary market?
So we primarily export to the US, to Africa, to the other countries in Africa. We've now started exporting to the US with Karoo Wild. And then we're also entering the market for EU. We started in the Netherlands and in Greece. But then we're obviously exploring other countries as well. We also export to the Middle East. And I think the next few countries for us will be the UAE.
Well, I think it's interesting to know, step back even a step and say, okay, why is this actually needed? Because as she alluded to with her pet, she started feeding a different protein, something the dog had never been exposed to. That has been a foundational technology and manner of taking care of dogs that do have allergies. And so as soon as the dog starts scratching, everybody on the internet say, oh, you need to switch their food, they're allergic to something. Maybe, maybe not. However, if you go back even into the 90s, you will see that there were some additional single source protein, single source carbohydrate. So one of the diets that I worked with and the team was fish and potato. And then we also worked with kangaroo and oats. So in Australia, there's a program, again, to control the kangaroo population so it doesn't have an overburdening impact on the environment. But here was this great protein source. How could we potentially use that? Venison, as you mentioned, in the United States, we do not, our laws does not allow us to sell any game meat. So any white-tailed deer is the primary venison, even elk, which is part of wapiti, which would be similar to red stag. In New Zealand, that's going to be referred, in Patagonia in South America, venison is red stag. There are some diets now on the market that have been utilizing venison. So this to me is very exciting because there are now some very unique proteins that our dogs have never been exposed to. And for those dogs that have some very severe allergies, we can help decrease that pruritic threshold through a diet regimen. And that can be part of a veterinary's overall health management program for some of these dogs.
So, Eric, why would an animal have less allergies to, let's say, zebra meat than it would to, our beef or chicken?
You're stretching me back to the, it's been a while since I've looked at some of the dermatology, but it is a inflammation response to the proteins and protein types. And so it may have been overexposure to early exposure, what have you, and it may be a decrease in some of the inflammatory markers that we have and some of the immunity development. And for that reason, they build up an allergy or an inflammation reaction to whatever those common proteins are. But then when you expose them via a diet to proteins that they have never been exposed to, you don't see that same inflammation reaction because you don't have, that onslaught of inflammation. So that's the neat thing. But so right now you're only handling, did you say the blessed buck?
A Springbok.
Springbok.
Yeah.
Okay. But there's opportunities maybe in the future for wildebeest,
Yeah, other African
impala,
antelope. Yeah.
kudus, water buffalo. So those are going to be, and there are some diets now And this was very interesting at the AFCO meeting, the definition of what a bison is, because American bison is a unique species, and then buffalo, which we refer to colloquially for the American bison, um, is a whole different species. So there's different types of water buffalo. You know, there's Cape buffalo in South Africa. There's water buffalo in the Asian countries and things of that nature. Again, all of these unique proteins, as well as the co-products that are incredibly nutritionally rich, is a great opportunity to bring those into the pet food industry.
No, I totally agree. And even more like additional benefits to using game meat is obviously the hypoallergenic aspect to it that you just explained, and that's one of the key components for us. We even have a dry pet food that contains game meat and some ostrich. So by the HS code, ostrich is also seen as game meat. So, and that's one of our top sellers because we're seeing that animals are struggling with these intolerances or these sensitivities towards common protein sources. So, and another thing about game meat that's unique is that flavor. It's got a very unique flavor to it. It's called a gamey flavor. And the only reason, the only way I can actually explain it to you, it's a bit metallic, liver-like, and that's something dogs and cats are attracted to. So it's a great appetite stimulant, and it actually adds to the palatability of the diet as well. So it's the hypoallergenic benefit, the nutritional benefit, the palatability on there, and obviously the sustainability and the whole environmental impact um, behind it, and obviously the whole of revitalizing the industry and the populations of the Springbok. So there's a whole feel-good story about using game meat.
Are there any species that would only be appropriate for pet food? So things that would not enter the human food system because of the gaminess being maybe too intense, or would it always be
I think in
a
most
byproduct?
people, I think it will always be a byproduct, but we are able to actually use high quality meat cuts. But at the end of the day, that goes to the human market, and that's how we do get the trimmings to use it. But it's available. We can use primal meat cuts if you really wanted to.
Well, I was just thinking, like you mentioned kangaroo. I have a business in Australia, and I don't think there's a lot of human food consumption of kangaroo. Is there?
I don't recall there being a lot. I know that it was part of, and it's been, several years, so the program very well may have changed. But at that time, it was part of the governmental program that needed to control the population in a very methodic, you know, way, and then we also needed to preserve the environment. So I have never seen kangaroo on the menu in my travels. Now, I've zebra, um, kudu, wildebeest, the wild games. Uh, Scott, for your reference, they pair exceptionally well with a Malbec. So that's.
I was thinking more bourbon or.
Oh well, that's if you. It does. It has a very rich, robust flavor, um, and it's great. But I haven't seen kangaroo on any menus in my travels. So
It's an interesting question, though, Gail. When you asked it, the first thing came to my mind is what are those in South Florida swamps, the anacondas or whatever, right? I can surely that's got to be a nice protein for pet foods, and I can't see myself pairing that with a good bourbon.
you start looking at some of those things. So we have had a number of what in this country is considered invasive species. So we have a lot of iguanas, and in South Florida, the way they keep track of the weather is, and when the iguanas will get cold and lethargic.
They fall out of the trees.
You see the
I've seen it.
iguanas on the newscast. But are there any components that are in the environment that the animals may consume that then get stored into meat that could be harmful to dogs or cats? And the reason I think of this is we started looking at camels through another international governmental program, but things in the camel's diet that didn't impact the camel got stored in the meat at levels that would have been harmful to dogs and cats. And again, this is 15 years ago. So my guess is no, but I always want to ask that question because, again, if you're looking at a novel protein, we got to think, all sides of that Rubik's Cube.
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. I didn't come up with anything like that yet. The vegetation in the Karoo area is obviously there is a lot of safe plants in there, and with Springbok being a ruminant as well, I don't think they will go for any funny plants. But yeah, we do see it like, for example, that flavor transfers into meat. So we've got lamb in South Africa called Karoo lamb, and because they eat that specific vegetation, you can actually taste that herbaceousness in the meat. And we do find that in game meat as well, that it can have an impact at the meat. So at the moment, what we are seeing in research is that the vegetation can have an impact on taste, but it can also have an but like vegetation can have an impact on taste, but it can also have an impact on the fat storage of the animal. But then, in terms of taste per se, there are differences between the muscle types that impacts taste as well. And that's what we've seen a little bit with the sensory analysis that I did on zebra meat. But with harmful ingredients or harmful plants, we didn't come across anything like that yet. I don't foresee that being such a major issue.
Gail, we've been talking about the benefits to African meats. Your background is sustainability. Do you see any benefits to sustainability, whether that's upcycled products or game meat? What thoughts?
Well, one thing that came to mind is we were talking earlier is one of the slides I presented yesterday was about one of my reasons why sustainability is so important to me and to OSI as a company is that world population continues to grow. We haven't hit peak yet. There's different points of view of when peak will happen and what that peak will look like. But the not only is population growing, it's growing disproportionately in the developing world. It's not happening in Europe and North America. It's happening in Asia and Africa. And so I often say that in addition to a supply problem, we also have a distribution problem when it comes to feeding the world. Honestly, it never occurred to me that game meat would be such an emerging opportunity for Africa to feed itself, right? So I think that's really cool. And it gives me a new perspective on how things could evolve as, necessity is the mother of invention, right? So I think that's a really interesting approach.
Oh, yeah, I think so too. And I think it's a forward thinking approach as well. I mean, game meat does form part of our culinary culture in South Africa. We do a lot of recreational hunting. And then also in some parts of Africa, they do consume bushmeat, wild bushmeat. So it's been part of our culture for many, many years. So, yeah, definitely a big opportunity there, which is very exciting for us.
Yeah, lots of great benefits. Any downsides from your perspective, Angelique?
Downside will be due to the ban that you can't really export fresh frozen antelope meat. At the moment, the only game meat that can be exported fresh frozen is ostrich, crocodile, and zebra because they don't get foot and mouth disease. But at the end of the day, there are companies like Montego that can pioneer innovation, and we are able to actually use game meat and manufacture it and put it into products. So I think for now, that's the only downside is that you can't export the fresh frozen meat, but then it also creates an opportunity for partnerships with companies like us that can do it.
Yeah. What do we know about consumer perception of these different proteins?
So in the human food market, it is a little bit, some people love it because of the health benefits, but it also have a very distinct taste, like I mentioned. So a lot of preparation needs to go into these game meats to obviously make it a little bit more palatable if you don't like the gamey flavor. But yeah, at the end of the day, we've got a lot of people that consumes it, that do hunting for themselves. We do find it in the retail stores. So, yeah.
I guess I'm kind of curious about specifically the U.S. market and potentially pet food owners?
I think there's a lot of education that still needs to happen for them to understand the backstory of game meat. I mean, they do, I think, link it with venison, and that's the whole reason with my presentation this afternoon. I do bring venison into the discussion to bring it back home, to tell them this is very similar in terms of nutritionals and fat and protein. But what are the differences? The species composition, and then there's also the backstory. A lot of people would think, oh, there's a downside. You need to harvest animals to obviously support the population, and just to try to explain them the whole life cycle of this. So I think a lot of education still needs to happen in outside of Africa, but luckily there are species that could be compared to game animals that makes it a lot easier.
Scott, one of my hypothesis, I guess, or my hope, is that these types of meats and proteins could be readily accepted by North American consumers in their pet food specifically, because veterinarians are already well versed in the use of novel proteins and even some of the proteins that have been novelly processed, such as hydrolyzed proteins. And their diet's already on the market and have been on the market, so there's a foundation there to build on. And they understand that what was novel 20, 25 years ago is not novel now, so what's next? To me, I think this is what's next. Also, there is a growing population that obviously is enjoying their pets in the outdoors. And so you will see as you walk the aisles, you're going to see a lot of the pet food bags, rather than being a color and, just wording, it's actually more of a scenic painting that will have depictions of various wild game, various types of game, a representation of the ingredients. So my hypothesis is that this will be readily accepted. We need to figure out how we can get it here safely, get it here appropriately, and start utilizing some of these proteins in our next generation super premium products.
Yeah. And I just want to add to that, there's a whole pet humanization trend that we're currently seeing, and that's we're seeing it in the USA, and we're also seeing it in South Africa. People are more educated about their pets' well-being and health, and they want to add those functional ingredients and those novel proteins to their diet, and that makes it more acceptable for pet owners.
Yeah, it makes sense to me, right? It's seems more natural, and for those that can't see, I'm using air quotes here. That harvesting an animal off the Serengeti or whatever is more natural than a feedlot steer, and so maybe interesting though.
So to that point, though, I'm just sitting here wondering about. Is there an overabundance of these game animals, or are we now competing with the natural order of the predators who rely on them for food today?
So that's a good question. So a lot of the game animals in South Africa is fenced off, so there isn't a lot of predators, and that's where it comes. You need to do population control. So we've got example like the Cape Mountain zebra. They're near threatened, if I remember correctly. So they don't get used for meat production at all. But now, because we don't really have census of all the Cape Mountain zebras, they've been propagating. So I heard the other day that there are a farm that has got a lot of them, and now what do they need to do with it? They can cull them, they can collect 1,000 of them for population control, but what do you do with the meat afterwards? So some instances there are more, the population is quite high, but then there's other instances where it's like Springbok. There's a lot of Springbok in South Africa, but we need to diversify the land in the Karoo region again, because it was known for having Springbok.
Angelique, any other big parts of your presentation that we haven't covered yet that need to cover?
I think just to go back to the product that we're using, just to talk about that a little bit, it's called Karoo Wild. And we've got such a nice tagline that we actually added to that product. And I think that just like summarizes this whole conversation, and that is to reward, revive, and rewild. So at the end of the day, our goal is when you reward your dog with this African antelope, which has a great nutritional value, you help and you support reviving a once thriving industry and reviving the Springbok populations. So I think that's a good summary of our whole goal in this thing we're trying to do.
Yeah, no, that's cool. As we kind of wind down here, if I could get each of you to kind of summarize just a couple key takeaways, and that was a great summary, and you might have wanted to save that, but I'm going to ask you to come up with another one. But a couple key takeaways you think that the audience ought to take from our conversation today. And Eric is my co-host down there. I would love to start with you if that's all right. Dr. Altom, with the adoption of fresh, frozen, refrigerated meat-type products, there's a greater demand for pathogen control. Balchem's recently created a product called pH Control Systems. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so what we have been able to do within the PetSure brand and our pH control system is leverage our heritage understanding and unique processes of microencapsulation to deliver specific acidulants that can help control the pH of the finished product and help be a hurdle for pathogenic bacteria growth. This product enhances the texture, maintains the color, maintains and supports shelf life, and helps maintain shelf life while inhibiting the microbial growth of pathogen bacteria. This was originally developed in the human food sector, and so we have translated that from the meat science and human foods safely and effectively into pet foods, ensuring that it is both labeled appropriately and registered for use in pet and specialty pet products.
So organic acids have been used for a very long time to control pathogens in meat-type products. What makes this pH control system different?
The uniqueness of this is the microencapsulation and being able to control the release of that acidulant into the product over a period of time. Quick release causes changes in the texture, changes in the color, loss of moisture in your finished product or the meat batter. And by controlling this release, we're able to eliminate those aesthetics as well as the functionality of the protein breakdown. Sure. I think that one of the things that people need to take away is that the pet food industry is a global industry and that we are actively collaborating together to come up with better ways, more sustainable ways to feed our pets in a healthy manner without competing with the human food products, but also making sure that we make the very most out of, in this case, any animal that we harvest, that nothing goes to waste. So that would probably be my key takeaway. And I'm very excited again for this topic because I see these as the next generation opportunities for some of our critical care diets that we may need to manage some of the health conditions.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Eric. And Gail?
Ditto.
I agree.
Kind of said what I was thinking. But I'll just add to it that, in my world, because I do spend so much time thinking about human food and sustainability in our supply chain, beef gets a really bad rap because of it being a ruminant animal and it produces methane. But it also feeds a whole lot of people and animals with its byproducts. So being able to diversify our conversation away from beef being the only ruminant animal that's part of this system, and that it is a global system, and there are opportunities for improvement in terms of, collecting that offal and not letting it go to waste. It just opened my eyes to some different possibilities, and I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Gail. Angelique,
You want
once
another
again,
wrap up?
yeah, come up with another good one.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is the fact that coming from Africa, and you don't really see any African ingredients in the global pet food industry. So, like Montego, we do have this big, we call it a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. And this goal is actually to get Africa on the map as a pet food manufacturing continent, and that's what we're trying to do. So we can contribute to novel proteins, we can contribute to the pet food industry, and actually in a very good way. So I think that is our whole that's my wrap up for this, if it makes sense.
Well said. How can the audience find out more about Montego and your products? How can they connect with you? You got an email address, Twitter account?
Yes, I've got a
X?
LinkedIn page.
LinkedIn.
I've got a email address, and we've got a website with
Okay.
all our products that you can see there. You can read all about Karoo Wild and obviously see some of our other products. And there's some snapshots of our facility as well.
Yep. And what is that email or the website?
It's www.montego.co.za.
Okay. Very well. Well, thank you
Yeah.
for that. Thanks for joining me here today. This has been a very, very interesting conversation. Look forward to your continued success. So good luck with your presentation as well. To our loyal audience, thanks for coming along once again. We hope you learned something. We hope you had some fun, and we hope to see you next time here at the Real Science Exchange, where it's always happy hour and you're always among friends.
We'd love to hear your comments or ideas for topics and guests, so please reach out via email at anh.marketing@balchem.com with any suggestions, and we'll work hard to add them to the schedule. Don't forget to leave a 5-star rating on your way out. You can request your Real Science Exchange t-shirt in just a few easy steps. Just like or subscribe to the Real Science Exchange and send us a screenshot along with your address and t-shirt size to anh.marketing@balchem.com. Balchem's Real Science Lecture Series of webinars takes place on the first Tuesday of every month, with the top research and nutrition topics that will impact your business. We also include small ruminant, monogastric, and companion animal-focused topics throughout the year. Visit balchem.com/realscience to see the upcoming topics and to register for future webinars. You can also access past webinars and search for the topics most important to you.